All righty, let's get going. We are 7:01. My name is Ian Horvath. I'm president of Portland Urban Beekeepers, and this is our September meeting. We are going to be talking with our panel of Dewey, Joe, and Andy on winterizing colonies. So got to always be thinking ahead. And although it feels like it just turned fall a little bit, I feel like a fall sun is coming around. Should be thinking about winter. So I have a quick little spiel and then we will jump into their presentation. So if you're not a member of Pub, please consider doing so. You get a bunch of different membership benefits as far as our swarm list or Bee Buddy program. You get to join us out in the apiary and a bunch of other stuff. Extractor rentals right now would be really relevant. And all of the money, a large portion of the money goes to supporting bee research. So last year we donated to OSU and yeah, and it's only $25 for the year. So supports a good cause. Like I said, one of our benefits is the Bee Buddy program. So if you're new or you're looking to mentor somebody, you can sign up and you get a little Google map and you get your pin, who your name is and where you're located, and you can look at whoever's around you and reach out to them and meet people outside of the meetings, and provides for that kind of in-person stuff that we're lacking right now on a one-on-one basis. So I've met a lot of people around me, and I'm sure a lot of other people on the phone have done the same. Bee days at the apiary. So the next one we have coming up is in September 18th. So I think 2 weeks from now, maybe next weekend. They're from 10 to noon. It's going to be a winterizing workshop. So kind of an extension of what we'll be talking about here tonight. Bring your Vivaldi cover and your outer cover, because we'll show you how to winterize your hive on the top of it. There is a cost if you want to actually pay for the installation, or you can kind of just see what we're doing and go do it on your own. But there's no markup, so it's whatever we pay for, we'll just charge you guys for it. And Jana will be sending out a sign-up form. Anything else, Jana, on the winterizing workshop or end of year party?
Oh, just we have quite a few people signed up for the workshop already, and I think this is our sort of first stab at letting people know we're going to have a party out at Green Anchors on October 2nd.
Yeah, that'll be fun too. That'll be a lot of fun. And if you guys haven't been out to Green Anchors, this is our little space out there. We got a few hives and a top bar and some link straw. So kind of tucked away back in there. Where is Green Anchors? If you've never been there, well, it's this conglomerate right here, and the hives are back in this area, but we prefer that everybody park at the Cathedral Park boat ramp area, and then you can just walk over into here and you'll see everybody standing around in this area. But yep, so if you're looking to go, just look up Cathedral Park, park in this area, and then walk around the street and walk down here, and you'll find us there. So all right, honey extractor class. We have it coming up on the 17th. And we have one more spot available, and this will teach you how to use the motorized extractor. So we'll actually be spinning frames on that day and going through the whole process and showing you guys what it's like to use a motorized extractor. This kind of certifies you to use the motorized extractor as well, just because we were doing one-on-one demos for it before renting it out, but we thought this is a better way and a better use of time to get everybody together. So if you would like to sign up, please contact Jana at vice-president, and I'll put that in the chat in a few minutes. And yeah, one more spot. It's gonna be up in Vancouver, so just north of us, and it should be a fun time. All right, time to get your hair done, do your nails, put your deodorant on, because we are going back in person in November. So November and December. We are actually going to do our meetings in person. November, because of where we're going, we had to change it to a Thursday. So November, it'll be Thursday the 3rd, not Wednesday, Thursday. And we're going to have Mandy Shaw, who's a past president of Pub, speak on the Sentinel program that she was a part of for, I think, a year or two. And we're also going to be holding our elections for next year. So you have to be at the meeting to vote. We're not going to try to split this up and do half online and half in person. So you have to be at the meeting to vote. We have 3 open positions coming up in 2023. So we have my role, president, Janitor's role, vice president, and then apiary manager, who's Bruce. So 3 open roles. If you would like to run for any of these positions, just let us know. I will drop a link to a Google form in chat. All you have to do is just give us your name and which position you would like to run for. And yeah, and then probably at that meeting, we'll have you just give a quick introduction of yourself before we do the vote, but be real simple, just paper ballots. And yeah, it will be at the Reedwood Friends Church, and that is on 2900 Southeast Steel Street in Portland, and that's from 7 to 9. So let me just drop this into chat while we're sitting here, but super excited. So we've been holding kind of meet and greets at Lucky Lab, and this is kind of our next extension of that, where we're going to actually have a in-person meeting. So I hope to see you all there. And if you have any questions on any of that stuff, just let Jen and I know. We can fill you in on any other details we might have missed. So upcoming speakers, we have our winterization panel tonight. Next month in October, we have Matthew Shepard of Xerces Society on pollinators and how we can work better together with them and our intersection between honeybees and native pollinators, and it should be really interesting. November, like I said, we have Mandy Shaw speaking on the Bee Informed Partnership, the Sentinel Apiary Program, and we have our elections. And then December, our last meeting of the year, we'll be having a honey tasting. So we'll be in person again at Reedwood Friends Church, and we'll be doing a honey tasting. We will give you guys more details on that next month. So, all right, and over to the main attraction. We have Dewey, who's going to start us off. So let me stop sharing. And away we go, Dewey.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ian. Good evening, all. Pleasure to be able to join you this evening. I'm pulling up a slideshow here. I will be running it. I'll do a quick introduction of what we are with our issues, and then we will go on with Joe and then Andy. This was our last session in the pub apiary, and we were doing winter preparation. So you can see putting in a entrance reducer to one of the 3 Langstroth hive colonies at pub. So it's a very timely topic because these are the things that we should be doing now. By now, our supers should be off. So we brought our truck in with our Hummer and taken supers off our colonies. We brought them in, honey extracting. Perhaps the one on the bottom is a little more appropriate, a radial extractor versus the top one there on left is a commercial. And then the honey is now in barrels. Actually, they're going to these plastic totes that are in the middle of this slide on the right, rather than all the barrels these days for our honey. And then the supers have been robbed out and finally then are put away in storage. So now it's on to our next activity or continuing activity of wintering. The biology is that as our temperatures eventually begin to cool down, but because bees are measuring day length, they're beginning their preparations already. The main preparations for bees are organizing a nest to be able for them to survive over winter. The diagram looks a bit like what the nest will eventually become, although it is not at that point in most colonies yet this time of year. Generally, the blue illustrates the brood in the frames below, often between boxes, for example, depending on how many boxes are shown. This configuration is showing 2 standard brood boxes. The orange is then honey, so the honey is then to the outsides and above where they're setting up in terms of where they will have their brood. At this point, as I indicated, this is not as well organized at this point. And then this diagram illustrates a QE, Queen Excluder, with then a whole box of honey up on top. that may be left on or may not be left on depending on how our bees are doing. And generally, we don't have very strong nectar flows in the fall, so that some of the honey that they've stored during the year may be left on colonies. Now, their activity at this starting this time, is to rear bees that are not as involved in brood rearing. And so we call them fat bees, because the fat body, an organ of the bees, has more of the vitellogen and more of the glycogen and the fatty acids stored in it. And this is so that they may then be able to call upon that for later in the spring, once we get past the winter solstice and the queen starts laying eggs again. So they need to rear a good cohort of those bees that are going to live a much longer period of time. As it does get cold, then they form into a cluster, and clustering readily, we can start to see 55, certainly around 50 degrees and below 50 degrees, we'll actually see them form into a cluster. And as it gets on those colder spells during the winter, the cluster gets more compact. As it warms up, it will then spread out, and they'll be able to get to the honey. And then as the nights cool down, they will go back into the cluster. And then so their fuel for the winter is honey. So that's what's going to be happening now from this month on into roughly March, some years later, February, when that nest then starts expanding and much of the honey has been used up. And then they're living on the food that's coming in, the pollen and nectar that's coming in. So that's sort of the bee biology of what's going on this time of year. Our tasks begin now with doing mite counts. We know that mites feeding on the bodies of bees and on the developing pupae of bees shorten the bee life. It's fairly dramatic, cutting bee life, at least in many cases, within half. And in so feeding, they spread viruses, and that is what is actually going to be the most serious. Bees can afford to have a mite feeding on it, but what happens is the mite feeding enhances or somehow supports the growth of certain viruses that then can reach epidemic proportions. So depending on what our mite counts are, then we might need to move to mite treatments. And it is best to make a count of mites initially. And then that what we have as an issue is not that the bees have mites. We can pretty much assume they're going to have mites, but how many mites are in the colonies? Generally, our problem with our fall beginning now in September is we can't treat ourselves out of a problem. If we have the bees have been taking care of mites through the year, and we've perhaps done some treatments as our colony has progressed through the year, whatever way we started it, whether we started as a swarm or a nuke or whatever, to keep the colony and mite numbers low in a colony. It's very difficult to bring a high mite number count of mites down. Another of our tasks at this time will be feeding. The feeding is, of course, the lifeblood. That's the fuel that's going to keep these bees warm enough to be able to rear some brood and keep themselves warm through the winter. Without brood, the internal hive temperature will drop down to sometimes into the 70s, but when they have brood, they've got to keep an area where they have the brood in the 90s. And so the food for all of that is honey. So if they don't have enough, don't have it in the right places, feeding is a management that will work for us. Uniting, a number of people like to try to have colonies that are uniform as they go into winter. And so that means moving frames around and or getting rid of or uniting the weaker colonies to some of the stronger ones. There are some risks related to uniting. I recommend that if you are thinking of uniting at this time of year, ask a couple of questions. First, of the colony that you're going to unite to another one. Is it too weak? Is it a colony that is just not going to necessarily be of benefit? And then of the colony that you're going to unite to, does that colony really need another colony? Does it really need some more bees? Does it need some more brood? Does it need a queen that you might then use in uniting? So there are certainly risks in uniting, whether we wish to do that management or not. Again, after initial mite treatments, depending on how high the number of mites might be, we might need to continue and have another mite treatment, sometimes with the same method of treatment, the same chemical, for example, or maybe also a different method, using a different chemical. And finally, then doing some other managements of buttoning up colonies. In this instance, we might be thinking of how are we going to try to make the Langstroth hive a little bit more similar to bees and bee trees. Are we going to emphasize in our management and how we believe in helping our bees, whether we're going to do top insulation or we're going to work with moisture venting, top moisture venting? A couple of different ideas in terms of buttoning up colonies. Mites, brand new 8th edition. We've just finished this. It's just been published. This is a free download, Tools for Varroa Management. This is one of your most valuable tools in terms of fighting mites. Tools for Varroa Management from the Honeybee Health Coalition. Again, this is answering the question, not does your colony have mites, but how many mites does each of your hives have? And then what are some of your options in terms of trying to treat them this time of year or any time of the year? Mite counting starts with sampling or monitoring for mites. We want to have a target number of 1 to 2%, and that is a measure of the number of mites that we separate from adult bees per 100 bees. So shown is taking a frame that doesn't have the queen on it, that has some young brood, a mixture of brood, shaking it into a white dishpan, taking a 1 cup measuring cup, and from that white dishpan, after some of the older bees have flown out, taking a half a cup of measure, putting it into a device that you make yourself, or in this case, it's a commercial sampler device, and then swirling either alcohol or dishwasher soap or shaking with powdered sugar, and then counting the number of mites. And so depending on the size of sample, a half a cup would be 300 bees. So we're looking at a 2% would be 6 mites. So something under 6 mites when we finally do this, our sample of the colonies. And that would apply to any colony. So in an apiary, if any colony is above that, then that you should consider treating. Now, if that number is high, generally we need to knock the numbers down quickly as we can now in September. And the best of the compounds to try to do that is Formic Pro. That will knock them out where they are. If the numbers that we count are lower, we want to keep them at a lower number. And so we've got a number of other options that we might use if the numbers in our sampling are lower. We can use either an essential oil. So shown on the left is a way to administer Apiguard, which is the thyme oil. Or we could use the synthetic strip of Apivar, or we could use as well as the Apiguard, the essential oil from Apilife Var. So if the numbers are low, so you've got a couple of options, but it's based on in terms of numbers. And then what you need to do is do a follow-up. If you use a treatment, does it work? Feed, well, we start that by hefting or use a luggage weighing device on the back of the hive, determine what kind of weight they have, and then feeding. So we're showing here a Vivaldi board, the moisture trap board at the top of the colony. We're feeding a sugar syrup. Generally, we would like to try to get as much syrup into the bees as we can. So we'll often feed 2 or 3 jars there at the top of the colony. And we're thinking of a heavier syrup for this time of year. Try to get as much syrup into a solution and then feed it to the bees. And then again, sample post-treatment, numbers are high. That would be, again, greater than 2% mites to the adult bee sample that you've taken. Then go ahead and treat again. Again, you might then use the same material. You can use both Apiguard and Apivar, shown left and right, again, twice, more than once, or you might want to switch from one to the other as your treatment of choice. And then as we start getting into the season, continue to monitor the brood, particularly the location and the amount of stores. Once we have our mites somewhat under control or are controlling them, we're then trying to make sure we have enough food for our colony to be able to survive through the winter. And generally the recommendation would be that top box will be the equivalent of roughly a top box full of honey, whatever size that you might have. Shown here is a standard, and then a half depth. This shows some extra wrapping around the colony during winter, going out and taking a quick look just by removing covers and seeing that where the cluster is there honey that you can see that is visible on either side, on frames on either side. So a couple now miscellaneous fall choices. Cleaning up from extracting, that is getting the equipment taken care of, allowing the bees perhaps to control rob the supers if you've extracted, cleaning up those bits and pieces, and then storing the comb. Storing and cleaning up of equipment. Many people like to scrape the top bars at this time, any burr comb, brace comb on the bottom, getting that scraped at this time. You saw the earlier slide of reducing the entrance, adding a robbing screen, both very advantageous. It's not too early for either of those to be on colonies. Insulating the hive top, however, whatever configuration you have on top of the hive, and then of course, getting rid of the product, whether you sell it or start giving it away. This is September is honey month, and the National Honey Board has a promotion this year, Honey Saves Hives. And it's emphasizing the importance of honey as a food product, but also the importance of bees in pollination of other foods that we eat. So check out the National Honey Board. They have some information that you might use in your own promotion, or as you give honey away, or use it yourself in the family. So some activities that we might do then, quick summary in terms of what is we have in the fall. Now I'd like to turn this over to Joe. Joe Maresh is our Oregon State Beekeepers Association Vice President. He lives out in the Canby area and has somewhere near 60 colonies. He sends bees to almond pollination with a couple of other beekeepers every spring. And so he has a bit of a shorter wintering season that he's going to be talking about now until he has to get the majority of his stronger colonies from here down to Oregon. Joe, it is all yours. Take it away.
So am I unmuted?
You are unmuted.
Okay. So what I would suggest, this is something to do in the next few days, do a hive assessment. And the things you want to be looking for is you want to see how much honey there is, see how much brood, and where the brood frames are. The brood frames should be under the honey, but if they're not, you can kind of move things around a little bit. Is the hive honey bound? In other words, is there so much honey in that hive that the queen can't lay eggs? Or it's like a lot of times this time of year, you'll see, there's very little brood because there's no place for the queen to lay. So that can be an issue. Do a mite check. Very, very important. First thing you should do is a mite check to see where you're at with the mites. If you have to treat, understand this. If you treat with Apiguard or Formic Pro, both those products retard brood production. In other words, they will actually stop it for a while because the bees just get all confused with those smells, or basically. So you have a brood break there. And then as the stuff, fumes off, then they start laying again. So the reason I say see where the food is and see how much brood is in there. When you start feeding, you don't want to be feeding just to feed. You want to feed to raise brood and for honey stores. If you've got a lot of honey and you've got a big population, you may not want to feed, especially if the queen has room to lay. If the queen has room to lay, you could feed, but when you feed this time of year, don't make the mistake of, I'll feed a couple times. Feed once a week for about 4 weeks. The reason for that is the queen starts to lay. Once you're simulating a nectar flow. And so the queen will, if the feed's only there once, not much happens. But if it's there day after, once a week, I feed a gallon a week. I don't feed any more than that. Then they'll build up brood. And the brood that they make this time of year, that's the fat bees. And you also want to put a pollen patty on. And the pollen patty will help them develop fat. So you need to monitor your bees throughout the winter, okay? When the rain starts or before it starts, cover your hives. I keep my bees on pallets because it's not the best way, but for me, it works because I load bees onto a trailer or a truck and go down to California in the wintertime. But what I do typically is in the fall, usually October, November, I put builder's felt over the top of the hives. And what that does, and I keep it so where it goes down, it covers the first joint, okay? Where the two boxes come together. And the reason for that is keep water out of that box. Also, my hives the deeps all have about a 5/8 to 3/4 inch hole in the center. And that really helps with venting, and it gives the bees, it gives them air movement. It vents the hive. And it's without that hole, there would be a lot of sweating going on in that hive as they use food. But I put builder's felt over them, and then I strap it down. It's kind of a pain to get in and look at things, but you're not getting into your hives and doing much with them at that point. But covering them like that keeps them dry. It keeps them dry as long as the hive is vented. And it also, like when the sun comes out, the sun may come out, but it may be 30 degrees. It actually heats the hive a bit so they can kind of move around. They're not going to go out flying, but they come out to the entrance and move around a bit. But covering the hives in this climate really gives your bees a big boost. Inner covers work well. Telescopic lids that are waterproof work well. And be prepared to use oxalic acid, either a drizzle, and you should be using with not with sugar water, but with glycerin, mixing oxalic acid with glycerin. If you go to Randy Oliver's website, he's got the recipes, or you could use vapor. And I usually do this twice in the wintertime, once late in November, and then another time, usually just before Christmas. And then that's it. And be prepared that if your hives are weak to feed dry sugar. Don't try to feed wet sugar. Don't try to feed wet sugar because in the wintertime, once the temperatures are down below 50 degrees, it's really hard on the bees. So dry sugar, dry birch sugar will stimulate brood production. So if you do that, be prepared that you're going to have to keep doing that. But I just like granulated sugar. You can make little sugar patties by just taking a little bit of water and mixing it with a couple of pounds of sugar, and just it crusts up real good and put it on the top. But it's really important now to do an assessment and do a check. But if you are going to treat if you have to treat for mites, now do it right away. Use something that is, Formic Pro is a good choice because in 2 weeks it's done. And use it full strength, don't use it half strength. Some people don't like it because they lose queens. My experience is you are probably going to lose that queen in the wintertime anyway. So, and if you have questions, I'm going to stop now and let Andy talk, and hopefully you can ask us questions.
Oh, you had a couple of photos that you sent. Want to talk about your?
Oh, okay, yeah. So this is 2008. It snowed out here pretty good. These hives I thought were dead, but they weren't. When I went to look at them in February, I thought, oh, there's no bees in here at all. I cracked that top box and lifted it, and they were all down below. Those are telescopic lids, and I had they're telescopic lids, and I had a top feeder on those. They're like a Vivaldi board. They're ones that I made myself, and it's real easy to be able to put pollen in there or dry sugar. It's got a place for the bees are going to go up. Make sure this time of year that there is honey above the cluster. If it's not, feed and move frames around so it is, because you can do that now. You're not going to do it in November or December or January or February. So, and there's another picture, I think, Dewey.
There's the other one.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, and I think you can see so some of these are the lids. These hives are actually sitting on a pallet, and but they're not covered. But I used telescopic lids at that time, and those telescopic lids with an inner cover, not by themselves, but with an inner cover, really save bees. Most hobbyists are not going to, have your bees on a pallet and be able to cover them with builder's felt. I mean, you can builder's felts, but you want to make sure that those hives, the tops of them are dry. And I think this one, you can see the snow is up almost to the hole. And that also had an inner cover, and the inner cover is notched, so it breathes a little bit. So anyway, so I'll let Andy go now.
Okay, Andy's a little bit further out in Clackamas County. He's out at Eagle Creek. Andy has a very ingenious way of helping to overwinter his colonies. He's in an area where there is a bit more of a winter than we have here down in the valley, and also an area where spring starvation can be a real issue there in the foothills. So Andy, I've keyed up the slides that you had sent. So if you want to start, go ahead.
Sounds good. Thank you. Well, hello, my name is Andy Rapp, and I'd like to just show you how I help my hives thrive while getting through the winter in Oregon. And I've been keeping bees for about 12 years now out in Estacada area. And I'll tell you, my first few years of beekeeping, I learned just how hard Oregon winters can be on a hive. For the first several years, I lost bees, and it was because of the weather, starvation. So I decided instead of quitting the bees, I would find a way to help the bees and myself. So I spent the next 2 years designing a solution that would help the bees get through the winter. If you want to click over the next one. So, okay, so if you look at these, what it is, I've integrated a system using metal covers that are hinged for easy access to the hives, so you can work around the hives. And it also works great as a table or a workspace when the covers are open. And I use them all the time as a work table. The covers protect the hives from the elements completely while stopping the wind gusts from permeating the hive, which is a huge thing. And since my hives has been under these covers, my hives never see any water on them ever. Okay, next. So the inside of the covers, you can see here how they tip back, and they take about 15, anywhere depending on the style, 15 to 30 pounds of pull to tip them back. And when they tip back, they sit on a brace, so they'll sit flat. Okay, next one. So here, you can see the inside of the covers are lined with a foil insulation, 1/2-inch foil, which radiates heat onto the hive during the daytime, raising the internal temperature by as much as 10 degrees during the day. So the bees don't have to work as hard to maintain the needed temperatures, which means less stress on the hive and a lot less stress on me about my bees becoming chilled. But if you look at this, you'll see the black box on top of these hives. We'll get to that in a minute. That's going to be the winter cover that's a part of these. So if you go to the next. So I've made these covers, they're 36 inches wide, 36 inches deep, and 60 inches high. Then they've got a base so the hive can sit 8 inches of clear space under the hive to allow for the correct venting. Now the tip back covers are designed to help static air under the hive. So you want that dead air so there's no wind blowing up and chilling your bees in the hive. But these covers also allow air current to pass over the top of the hive. And all of my hives that I use on this have screen bottom boards because I want to get all the ventilation equal throughout the hive and not just out of one hole. So from there, the next 3 or 4 pictures, you can just kind of click through. And so I designed these covers to help control the air flowing through the hive while extracting the moisture. And that was the big thing for me. So if you go on another couple pictures, these are just different views of these covers set up and set back. And you'll see that I use a P-rock under all my hives, which eliminates 90% of the moisture coming out of the ground. It eliminates the insects coming out of the ground. Any bugs that you would normally see that end up in your hives, I never have bugs in my hives because it's dry around in the surrounding area. So here are the parts for the winter top cover. So as you saw in that one photo, there's a box that I set on top of the hive for wintertime. And when I'm done feeding late in the fall and it starts getting down around 50 degrees, I will take this box, which I've called a winter top cover. Now, this winter top cover is the real answer for keeping your hives in the wintertime. For me, at least, it made my life so much easier. So I start with a honey super cut down to 4.5 inches in depth. And I sectioned it off into 3 compartments. The outer 2 compartments are covered on the bottom with 1/8 inch hardware cloth. And the center compartment is covered with 1/4 inch hardware cloth. At 1/8 inch, the bees cannot go through it. At 1/4 inch, they gladly will climb through it. So the outer compartments hold screen bags, which you see down in the bottom. And the bags, I use filter screens for 5-gallon buckets of paint. And inside the screen bags are hardwood chips. I found that softwood, pine, and fir chips will turn black, they mold, they hold bacteria. Hardwood chips such as alder, which is what I use, will absorb the moisture, but the wood is hard enough that the bacteria doesn't stay into it. So the way this works is the outer compartments are covered so the bees can't climb through. So the screen bags with the hardwood chips for collecting moisture in the hive with the 1-inch screen, 1/8 inch screen under it are put on the outside. The center compartment is for feeding and air exchange. It has the 1/4 inch screen so the bees can enter to feed. And what I do is I will feed all winter long. I feed Demand Lake's winter patties, I feed fondant, and I feed a lot of candy canes after Christmas because candy canes are dirt cheap and the bees love them if you break them up and put them in there. So the top of the center section has a screen cover that fits on top of that so that I can take the screen cover on and off to feed the bees to the top of the hive, and you're not removing this box. This box will stay on there all winter. So when you pull your cover off to look at this, you'll see that you can see through the screens, you can see the compartment, you can see what's going on in your hive. So the whiteboard you see with the 6 holes, that slides under the hive to regulate the correct amount of air flowing into the hive, which that normally slides into the mite track on the bottom under your hive. And like I said, all the hives have screen bottoms on them. So the long silver foam piece that you see in the center that has 3 holes in it, that will sit on top of the center cover, center feeder area, to regulate the exhaust air coming out of the hive. If that makes sense to you. So the last item on this is the screen top cover. Now this allows for the correct height needed to allow the air escaping to exit on all sides of the hive evenly. So you're not getting a draw from one side more than the other. And these screen top covers, if you were to use them, you'll find out they're a great asset all year long on your hive. I never take these off. These screen covers will help dry your honey quicker. It's easier for viewing your hives. It's better ventilation in the summertime. And it stops 100% of robbing over the top of your hives, which is a huge thing at different times of the year. I won't get into that too much right now. So I designed this system using an air balancing system to figure out the correct airflow needed to pull the moisture without chilling the bees. And that was the hard part. What I did, I tested on 1 control hive and 4 test hives over a 2-year period to get these down. And when I was using an air balancing system, I took and dedicated 1 hive, cut the frames out, drawn frames, and I made a foil ball and put a light in it to get 97 degrees into the hive. And from there, I worked to try and get the correct airflow. So basically, the completed system uses a chimney effect. The heat from the cluster draws air in through the 6 bottom holes and up along the sides of the hive. And as that air reaches the top of the hive, it rolls off the wood chip bags. The moisture collects in the wood chips bags. Then 10 to 15% of the warm air that's at the top of the hive will exit through the center, while the remaining warm air compresses and rolls back down onto the cluster. This way, the bees are able to get additional warmth from the circulating air. And I found out this is a huge thing because normally the air coming in the bottom of the hive will cross over the cluster and it will continue on up and out. Either that or it will condense on the top and rain on your bees. And every drop on a bee can kill your bee in the wintertime. This way, I have found out that letting a small amount of moisture out forces the warm air, keeps it to the top, but it also compresses. And when it rolls down, the bees can reuse that same warm air 2 or 3 or 4 times before it exits the top of the hive. So the bees don't have to work so hard to keep themselves warm. And like I said, these winter covers don't work well without adequate ground clearance. Your hives need to be about 8 inches off 8 inches of clear airspace under it for the system to work correctly. I'm not sure where we're at with the picture. Oh, there we go. Here you can see the way the bottom board slides in, or the bottom tray slides in. And it just gives me a way to direct the airflow where I want it into the hive. And here's a little deal if you think about it. I figure if on the average, they're between 30 and 40% in backyard beekeepers. They lose 30 to 40% of their hives in the winter from die-off, from the elements or starvation. This system has made beekeeping for me less stressful and much easier through the seasons because my die-off has gone to 0. I have gone for 8 years without losing a hive from starvation or from wind, rain, or cold. And this was a game changer for me because that way I no longer thought of getting out of the bees because it was too hard and I kept losing. This took care of 50% of the worries that I had with my bees. They took care of themselves. It was just a great way. So basically, in short, the advantages to this system are it works as a heat system in the hive with no external system needed. It keeps positive airflow with great chimney effect. So you do get enough of a changeover of air in your hive to where you get very little moisture. It keeps your humidity down a lot of times to 35% in the wintertime instead of 80%. The water does not run down the sides of the inside of the hive because it's collected in these bags. And what I do is I take the bags out, put them in the shop, dry them out, and I put 2 other bags in place, and it takes just a few seconds to do that. So this system, it pulls the moisture from the air and recirculates dry air back into the brood. It makes it easy to change the chip bags through the top. And here's a nice thing, the amount of moisture in the bags helps tell the height, the health of the hive, and the position of the brood in the hive. Because when you put these bags in, they might weigh a quarter pound, but there's times when you will take them out after a week to 2 weeks, and a bag might weigh 5 pounds because it's got that much water in it. And that water would be dripping on your bees if it was not collected in these bags. The other nice thing is when you pull a bag out, it's very easy to view the bees. You can take a flashlight and look down in the frames. You can see where the honey is. You can see where your bees are without taking the screen cover off. All you're doing is taking the bag out, and you can look down, the bees will not fly. So if you go to this one last picture here. Okay, here if you see, it's drone comb. So in the springtime, the hive will start to go up into the food area in the center of these, and they will build huge amounts of drone comb because it's warm up there. And when they build drone comb, that means the mites are going to be up there. It's an easy way, again, to tell the strength of your hive. So it just works so much better for me to do that than for me to take and put drone frames in or deal with it other ways. So the center feeder works great as a drone chamber in the spring. Makes feeding very easy without disturbing the hive because you can pull the screen cover off, feed, put the cover back on. And here's what made a difference for me. I no longer was investing in nukes each year to replace my hives that died. Strong hives early in the year made for strong hives all the time. And when those strong hives come out in the spring, that meant less stress for the bees, less stress for me, and it made me want to be a beekeeper even more. That was the big thing with this, is finding a way to get rid of the stress to the bees, the stress to me. And this thing has so many advantages to it. And I do sell these. I've sold many of these all over. This is something that people can build themselves. If you wanted to look at these, I'm more than happy to have people come and look if they want to build their own. I have sold several hundred of these over the years. And I just think it's kind of a different way to go. And I understand that it's not a way for everybody, especially if you're a commercial beekeeper with a lot of hives. I've got a dozen hives and that puts a lot of covers out there, but to me, it's well worth it. So that's pretty much kind of a different idea of wintering over your bees. A lot of little items all packed into one little box. Any questions for people?
Yeah, let's open it up to questions.
Can we do the questions from the chat real quick?
Yeah, let's do that first and then we can open it up to the group.
Okay.
Hey.
The first question in the chat says, what happens to these beautiful hive covers during high wind conditions?
Okay, these, if you look at the frames, are anchored into the ground. So I set these on 4x4 frames, and then the hinges are screwed to it, and there's enough weight to these covers. I have never had a cover lift on its own.
That's great.
And I do have some of these covers in places such as Yakima. I've got some in Pendleton and some in Bend, and people have never had a problem with these covers opening. And we always try and face them to the south.
And then the next question in the chat says, so we're looking at a metal board, a screen bottom board, normal boxes, modified super as the winter cover, a screen top cover, and was there something else?
It was not a metal board. That's the insert that goes into the slide in the bottom board. It could be metal, I suppose. Do you make a metal, Andy, or wood,
No,
or-
I don't. They're signboards, the same as a mite board is. It's a thin white signboard,
Okay.
which is really inexpensive.
They're going to get
And then
real
on
cheap
top of
in a
this-
couple months.
And then on top of your screen top cover, then you have your telescoping cover.
Yes, and I do not use the solid interior covers
Okay,
at all.
great. Thank you for answering those questions. Is there anyone else who would like to unmute and ask questions?
And I might emphasize with Andy, he indicated he leaves that screen cover on top year round. It's not so he has substituted in a solid inner cover for a screen inner cover.
Correct.
I'll just ask some general questions. So how much honey do you feel like you need, this is to all three of you, per hive to make it through an average winter?
You
I'll
should have
start.
about 45 pounds at least.
A box, the top box should be the equivalent of being full. Some will be in the bottom box frames, but the top box equivalent to be full.
Whether it's just strictly honey or honey and syrup in those frames.
Right.
So right now, if you look at a good healthy hive, it should be in excess of 50 pounds. Like most of mine are about 70 pounds right now.
Joe, that's a box and a medium or two standard boxes, 10 frames.
There are 10 frame, my equipment is 10 frame boxes, and most of my configurations are double deeps. I do use deep in Western also, but you want to have a minimum of 45 pounds. And then even at that, you have to really watch it.
Joe, you mentioned you have a pole in the middle of your bottom brood box, right? If I heard that correctly. Can you talk a little more about what you mean by that? Is that just a metal pole in the middle? Is that got perforations on it?
Let's see, I'm
Sorry, you said you had a pole in your bottom box, right?
a hole, a
A
hole.
hole, okay,
Yeah.
all right.
I have in all my deep boxes, I put a hole in those. And the reason that hole vents that hive.
Hmm.
These are livestock. Livestock needs air. Doesn't need a lot. And you want all the holes facing the same way. You wouldn't want one hole in the back and one hole in the front, because the draft will kill them. But, you know, and also I do use inner covers, not on everything, but most of them, and they're vented. The inner covers have a little, about a 3/8 by 1/4 inch slot in them. And where I'm using just a telescopic lid, not a telescopic, a commercial lid, basically a migratory lid. They're modified, that they have a rim around them, and they're also vented.
How large is that hole you have it? How large do you have that hole?
That hole is anywhere from 5/8 to 3/4 of an inch. 1 inch is too big, I've found. 3/4 of an inch to 5/8 works really well. And the bees prefer that entrance. Another thing too is that on my pallets, the entrance is severely reduced. It's only about 6 inches across.
Interesting.
And then if you need to plug the holes on the front of the hives, I have them the same as Joe does. We just put cork in them, just plug them with a cork. I plug one of the 2 holes in the wintertime, leave one open all winter.
Andy's system is a premium system. My system is more of a commercial type system. So his system is going to work better.
But it doesn't move.
Andy, I was going to ask you about during the summer, those covers you have, do you ever tip them back because you find the sun is shining in there too much and causing too much?
I tip those back all summer. The only time
Oh,
I
okay.
tip them over the hive is if there's a bad storm coming to where the hives will get pounded. Other than that, come springtime, once the rains have gone, they stay uncovered all the time.
Hmm.
Hey, Andy, we had a question come in on the chat asking you, what size screening do you use on that screen that's on the top,
1/8 inch.
1/8
The
inch?
top screen cover is 1/8 inch.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Andy, tell them how you adjust the screws to
Yes,
fit
that
that.
was one thing I missed. On all of these screen covers, I put a small lath screw, a small screw in the top corner of each one of these covers. And what it works for is in the wintertime, that gives you a 1/8 of an inch of gap when you set your top cover on that screen cover, 1/8 of an inch gap all the way around when the screws are screwed down. So you've got the even amount of airflow coming out under that top cover. In the summertime, I will take those screws and I will run them out to where sometimes they're a 1/4 inch raised. So when I put the top cover on in the summertime, I've got a 1/4 inch of gap, which greatly helps to vent the hive in the summertime. So you don't see near as much bearding on the outside because the bees are actually not so hot in the hive. So those screws on each corner make a huge difference.
Andy, in the
Instead of trying to-
photo that I pulled up, that was one of your early tip backs, hinge covers, and it's lying on the ground. But now you
Yes.
have actually got it on a post so
Well,
that
what-
you give
what I
the
did
working
is-
surface.
That one on the ground, that's for women because it only takes about 15 pounds of pull for a woman to grab the handle on the back and pull it back, to tip it back. To where the others take about 35 pounds of pull because of the offset on the. So these style take a little bit more pull to pull them back than the other style. So these are what I call the men's covers and the others are the women's covers. Just it's easier for them.
This gives you a working space too, though, as you indicated there. And
Yes, gives me a 3-foot working space behind the hive to work with. Any other questions?
I've got nothing from my side. That was super informative and helpful. And I actually really liked hearing from each of you on the different techniques and things you guys do. Does anybody else have anything? Nicole?
And like I said, if anybody's interested in doing them themselves or would like to look at something like that and get an idea, I'm more than happy to have people come out all the time and look at these. So if it's something they want to do for themselves, more power to you to make your bees healthier and happier.
I have your phone and email up now, Andy.
Thank you.
Can I pitch the Oregon State Beekeepers Conference real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's hear about it.
Yeah, so the conference this year will be at Florence, Oregon, and it's the October 28th through the 30th. And it's also the pub, since the pub is affiliated with the Oregon State Beekeepers Association, you guys get one free admission to the conference. So you guys need to figure out what you want to do with that.
Sounds like a great raffle item.
Yeah. But if you want to see what the program is right now, if you go online, if you get the Beeline, it was in the last issue and it'll be in this issue. Or you can go to the online issue of the Beeline and you'll see not everything's finished yet, but almost. And we should have a registration, online registration open in a week or so.
Awesome. And how many people typically go to something like that? I feel like it's a pretty large event.
Before COVID, we regularly expected about 300. Last year, we were about 220, but we also had, if you don't want to go there, if you're worried about COVID, which people should be worried about, you can purchase it online. It's not $150, it's $100. And if you do purchase it and you go in person, we will have it available until the end of the year. So a lot of times you're out in the hall speaking to somebody and you miss something, you can watch it. So it's online. We will be broadcasting it live via Zoom. And then we will also, it'll be recorded so you can, just like your meetings are. So.
And
And
the event center that it's at in Florence is a beautiful place, very comfortable seats, lots of room. So you don't have to worry you have to sit next to somebody. There's plenty of room. It's a very nice place.
and suitable for hobby beekeepers, backyard beekeepers, commercial beekeepers, sideliners, everybody.
Oh, yes, our program is designed for everybody. We have Kelly Kohanek from WSU. She's going to run a program for basically focusing on small scale beekeeping, which is hobby beekeeping. And that's what she wrote her doctoral thesis on. So, but go to the website or just look at the Beeline, and we have a list of the speakers and what they're going to be speaking about. And when the website is up, you'll be able to read the abstracts, which are what the talk is basically about. So.
Yeah, that's super exciting. Yeah, we had Kelly on 3 or 4 months ago to talk about her, what you were just talking about with the small scale beekeeping, but I'd love to see that in person again. So that was super interesting.
Yes, and we will have Russell Highcomb from Highcomb's Honeybees. He will be speaking about this. I'm really wanting to hear this because he brokered our bees last year down in California, and he will be doing it again this year. He had in their operation, they've been tactic free. Tactic is Amitraz for 4 years. So they're running a commercial beekeeping company and queen rearing operation without using, off-label chemicals. And I'm impressed with that because commercial beekeepers have a very difficult time dealing with varroa mites. And, you know, when you have thousands of colonies, which Hykums does, he brokers about 7,000 colonies in California for, you know, people like from Oregon and Washington, people like me will take their bees down there and we'll broker them. So he would be real interesting. And then he's going to talk about queens. And then we're going to have Ellen Toppenshofer speak about her research in wintering over queen banks and nukes. So that'll be interesting. I'm going to try to winter over a queen bank. Right now I've got a queen bank of about 24 that's still going strong. So anyway.
That's cool. Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that. Anybody else have any other questions or things you want to share with the group before we jump off?
We've had several people commenting that they really appreciated the panel and all the information. They thought it was all super interesting from all three of you guys. So thank you so much for sharing your evening with us.
Yeah, I really appreciate that.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Yes,
Yes.
thank you very much.
Cool. Well, we will send out the recording probably tomorrow afternoon. And thank you everybody for joining tonight. And I will see you back here in October. So,
Sounds great.
bye everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.